Get this party started. All right? A quick word here. I think there are a fair amount of the journalism students who say, okay, I get it. He was invited to do the commencement. Then there's a lot of the arts people who are saying, what's this? Let me just explain. There is a nexus here that you may not know about. So my father is a Broadway producer. I grew up with the arts my entire life. That's the good news. That's the good news. But when I was a young teenager by his side, seeing all the vagaries of the business, I said, that career is a little too rough and tough for me. So I ran into the welcoming arms of television news. Woo! So, that's where we are. And that's why I'm here. So good morning to all of you. What a fantastic day. I want to first thank President Pelton, as well as the chairman of the Board of Trustees, Jeffrey Greenhot. I want to certainly congratulate fellow honorees, Tony Kushner, Robert Pinsky, and my basketball partner, Bobby Brown. Because she can hit that shot from the outside. Sometimes I speak in front of groups or I'll just meet people and they'll say to me, I had no idea you were this tall. And of course, I actually was aware that I'm this tall. And so I always have that moment with someone to say, okay, well, just let me know how long we need to absorb all of this and then we can move on. And then we'll do that. So this is a great day. You are surrounded by loved ones. You are filled with a great sense of accomplishment. You're at an incredible crossroads of your life. You want my advice today? Stay exactly where you are. No, seriously. I mean, this is no time. This is no time to be leaving the safety and the fun of Emerson College. I mean, can't you just put this off a little bit? Have you seen the unemployment rate? Just think about the world that you want to enter into. I'll just take off a few facts. Nothing but tumult in the Eurozone. That's number one. If you are not a scientist or an engineer, you're going to be singularly blamed for America's decline. Just saying. And as if you don't already know this, it is far from clear whether the Boston Red Sox are even going to make the playoffs. So we have that to contend with. By the way, if this thing hits me in the side of the face one more time, I am going to fall out, okay? So, here is my simple prescription. Tell whoever is responsible for funding your education that you are not leaving this campus until and unless Congress passes the Simpson-Bowles debt reduction deal. Now, I want to be careful. I'm not advocating a pro or con. I'm just saying it might be a good demand. Now, if you are the one who's responsible for funding your education, let me just point this out. Yes. A, congratulations, and B, responsibility is highly overrated. I don't mean to be such a downer. I just feel like that I should be the one to tell you that life after today is just a daily lesson in humility. Okay? Can you handle that, is the question. I mean, look at you. You're on top of the world. I see your smiling, beaming faces. You're full of confidence. You're about to enter into the world. I mean, you all have persuaded yourselves that this is a good look. It's not a good look. Maybe it's just me. I actually graduated 20 years ago. 20 years ago, back in 1992. Now, this was a different era. This was a time when young people actually spoke to each other in person rather than announcing to no one in particular that you're the mayor of Sweetwater. Now, I just want to soak in the applause on that, and when those died down, I just want to take a moment and feel good about myself. But now I have to admit that I actually had to ask the younger staff members on Meet the Press what this whole Foursquare thing was about and being the mayor. I had no idea. But to be serious, I'm only 41, and I actually thought for a while that meant like we were connected, like and then I realized that's not actually the case. But I'm very hip. At least I thought I was hip until I walked into the hall here, okay? And I started crying. And I always get so much, and by the way, I could cry at any moment. So I'm just putting that out there. And I cry because I realize that I have much more in common with your parents than I do you. Sure, I remember sitting where you were. I remember it vividly. I remember what I was thinking that day, but I'm a dad of 3 young kids. It sounds hard to cry now. And all I can think about is how much I'm going to do of this, and I don't even know you. How hard I'm going to be crying when my 3 kids, God willing, graduate from college. So, I thought I would try to just share a little bit of perspective from my life and see if you find any of that useful. I think it's important, in all seriousness, to go into the world and learn how to be resilient. Resilient. I learned this early on. When I was 15 years old and in the backseat of my mother's car, she was arrested for drunk driving. Mom was an alcoholic, and it was bad. It was bad for years. I suffered through the pain of seeing the woman who was supposed to be taking care of me self-destruct before my very eyes. And as she was taken away in handcuffs into a highway patrol car that night, I realized that my sister and I could no longer keep the secret of her drinking any longer. My mother thankfully realized that too. And since that night, she has been sober. 26 years now. 26 years later, she has given me and my sister the gift of her own redemption. She changed herself and salvaged her relationship with us. And today she's a loving parent and a grandparent. And I feel like what mattered to me about that period is that it was then that I learned how important it was for me to be self-reliant and, yes, resilient. Life had not gone as I had planned it. And no one on the outside of our little world fully understood how bad things were. But in the dark places, I found my drive to be a journalist and the will to guide myself, even when it was tough. I was a survivor. And it's relevant, I think, because to all of you I say, you're going to have tough days ahead too. You're going to struggle, and you will fail. You will fail at something. And the problem is not failing, but the test is, how do you respond when that happens? Will you be able to summons the will and the drive to move forward? I mentioned humility before, and I want to return to the theme. I had a speech teacher, a speech and debate coach in high school. She told me when I was 17, she said, "David, you always need someone in your life who tells you you're not as great as you think you are." And that is why God invented viewer mail. And more than that, in fact. So, here I am. I've worked since I was 18 to make it in this business as a journalist. And here I am. I've covered the White House. I have my dream job as moderator of Meet the Press. I feel like it's all come together for me. And yet, just last week, I was in New York. And a woman came up to me and she said, "You look familiar. Do you work for Mary Kay?" At first, I said, "I'm a Bobby Brown man." But then I realized this is humility at work. Someone in my position is always well served remembering that we were all empty vessels that too often are filled with our pride, our selfishness, and insecurity, crowding out other people and their feelings and their points of view. As you set off into the world, remember the importance of working as part of a team, not just an individual, but the ability to work as part of a team to find success and solutions. And remember to value each other's points of view, even if you don't share them. I think our public discourse today is too divided, and it's often too toxic to be constructive. It's an issue in the news media. It's certainly an issue in our politics, and we look to you to begin to turn that around. There's also the importance of perspective. Perspective from beyond our singular views of the world, and there are a lot of ways to get it. For me, I got perspective when my children were born, and I realized in an instant that I would give my life for them. As they grow up and I pursue my career, I also remember to pursue great parenting. Now, make no mistake, I don't always get it right. But I'm striving, I'm trying, because I know it matters. I had a journalist friend say to me once, you're never going to wake up and say, "Did you work enough?" I think about that when I'm with my children, and I think about what my children would say if they're blessed enough to be where you are today. Will they say that I was always around, that I was there for the ups, but for the downs as well? That I encouraged them and that I influenced them? I try daily to ensure that that answer is yes. And I want to second this as well. Remember, graduates, to thank your parents and to tell them that you love them. Because the truth is, it works every single time. My 6-year-old has figured this out, and he's going to own the world. It's fantastic. I also get perspective from my wife, who served her country in the Army, and later in the Justice Department, when she served on the government team that prosecuted the men behind the Oklahoma City bombing, which is how we met, coincidentally. Beyond her service and accomplishment, I've learned that there is nothing sweeter or more meaningful than having a great and loving partner with whom I can journey through life. And I wish that blessing for all of you. I get perspective from our military veterans and their spouses. I spent some time with both recently. Vets who have returned or are returning from wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and are suffering from PTSD or drug and alcohol addiction, or struggling to recover from physical injuries as they try to reintegrate into civilian life. Keeping our lives in perspective helps us to focus on setting goals that are larger than our own self-interest. That makes us more empathetic. It also helps us to strive for purpose and meaning in our lives. And a few words about work. Do great work. Do work that you love, work that keeps you learning. People often ask me what drives me, and I always say that it's my passionate curiosity. It fuels everything I do. I love a good story. I love to keep learning new things. I love to travel. I get to question politicians and presidents, world leaders and CEOs, and ask them the tough questions. I even learned how to speak French to power. During the Bush presidency and his first trip to Paris and in Europe in the run-up to the Iraq War, a lot of demonstrations throughout Europe, and I said at the Élysée Palace in Paris, I said to President Bush essentially, why do all these people so dislike you? And then I turned to President Chirac and I asked him in French, because I had been a student in France, I said, in French, would you comment on this? And it's as if I committed a war crime. President Bush took off his translation headset and he said, "Gregory, what are you doing?" He said, "God memorizes 4 words in French and he plays like he's intercontinental." Now, I was used to this kind of back and forth with the president, but, newsflash, I'm also on television, so I was a little full of myself, and I was concerned that people around the world would only think I spoke 4 words of French. So immediately I said, "Well, Mr. President, I could go on." He said, "Really? I'm impressed." Que bueno. Now I'm bilingual. So this created an international incident, and I actually had to call my boss, Tim Russert, at the time, and I said, Tim, we've had a problem. He said, well, doesn't Chirac speak English? And I said, well, yeah, but I was in France, and I speak French, and I got caught up in the moment, and I didn't think it'd be a bad thing. And anyway, every time I saw the president, he'd say, yeah, that's Gregory. He's the one who spoke French to me. Sometimes I even get answers in the course of my questioning and on the program that change things. Like when I asked Vice President Biden about his views on same-sex marriage. That seems to have created a stir. There's a lesson in that, which is always ask a direct question. You never know what might happen. But to get to this point, I paid a lot of dues. I went to places that most people wouldn't. I took the time to learn to be a good communicator, but not just on television, but in person. I urge all of you, learn how to make an impression on people beyond what you can do on Twitter and Facebook. Learn those interpersonal skills. It's so important. And I'm all about social media. I'm all about the powerful tools of communication and connectivity that bring people together, that destroy barriers. That's great. But it's the ability to communicate, interact with others, and make a difference that I think makes a tremendous difference in your lives. I think it's also important, and I want to, because of the strength of Emerson College, I want to give a big cheer for liberal arts education. I'm no Albert Einstein, but it was Einstein who said that college is not about making you smart per se. It's about teaching you how to think. Learning how to think critically, form opinions, become analytical, make these judgments. It's so important. It's the importance of learning philosophy. It's the importance of learning sociology, of being well-read, of learning how to write, learning how to question. You know, all of you will go into the world in your own separate way, and you'll be called upon, you'll be valued by the extent to which you're thinking strategically, your ability to solve problems. All of us, we're in the midst of our careers, and we come upon challenges, and we think, how do we evolve? How do we get better? How do we respond to the changing demands? How do we do shows that people your age will like? I just threw that in there in case anybody has a note, in which case you can send it to me. Or tweet it out, either way. But your ability to come in and solve those problems and think strategically will make you so valued, and you'll be able to provide such great value wherever you are. I read this suggestion, too, in the Wall Street Journal the other day that I thought was so great. Read the obituaries. And I don't mean that to sound macabre, but I find myself doing this, and that's not just because I'm getting so dramatically old at 41, but it is that, you know, it gives you some insight into how other people have lived their lives, that there's no one direction, no one route to follow, and people have done some really interesting things to get to where they are. Now, if those things don't interest you, I have some practical advice too, which is you should never settle in your life unless you don't have any other options, in which case, yeah. And I'm with Bobby on the point where you should always be yourself, unless you find that's not working for you, in which case, you know, you can just course correct a little bit. So my first commencement address I ever gave was in high school, my high school commencement, with a look that was similar to this. And the theme I spoke about was time, which I thought was very creative, but anyway, that's why I come back to it now. This is your time now. It's nobody else's, so I hope you savor it. Waste some of the time if you like, but make sure that it has meaning. I sometimes look at my children as they grow up so fast, and I make a point to just stop and look into their faces, because I want to live in that particular moment that's fleeting and rejoice. And so I urge you to do the same in your own lives today and in your many tomorrows. Stop, look around, and be thankful. You're building a hell of a life. Thank you so much, and congratulations.